the actual femur. The femur right here has a couple of very important things, and it's big, so hopefully none of this, it's not like the hand bones where it's kind of so small you have to have a memory of it and have some kind of mnemonic to help you. In terms of the femur right here is very similar to what we see in the humerus. In the humerus, so here's a humerus over here, here's a femur. What we'll notice in both is there's a very big, very shiny, very glossy head region right here. Now, in terms of the humerus, the neck isn't that prominent, but for the femur, the neck region is very prominent. And when people like break their hip, usually it is at this area that breaks. The neck, the head. Now with the head, there's an indentation that's very important. This is called the fovea capitis. This fovea capitis, you need to write down. I do not think it's on your word list, so make sure you write it down. Fovea capitis. Now the fovea capitis is where arteries come in that allows you to bring nutrients to the head of the femur and to the neck of the femur. So if you guys ever heard of Bo Jackson, when he dislocated his hip, ruptured his artery called the nutrient artery that goes into that fovea capitis. Because of that, the whole tissue, the whole bone region died. And as a result, once it did, they thought he could come back, but they didn't notice that he had a lot of necrotic bone tissue. And the only way he could actually walk normally again was that they actually had to do a hip replacement on him. In a hip replacement, they take out everything here. As they kind of remove the head neck region, they put a titanium ball and socket joint in there. So it's a completely different joint. Just like in the actual humerus right here, you have in the humerus a greater tubercle and a lesser tubercle. We have very similar things in the femur. We have a greater tubercle outside here, laterally, and when we flip, you're gonna notice that how thick this greater tubercle is right here. It's thick, it's incredibly strong. Your hip adductors are gonna go right here, right? Abductors, not adductors, abductors, right? So all of your hip abductors, the machines, when you go to the gym, you put your legs kind of real sandwich them together, and the purpose is just to kind of move your legs apart. That is your abductors. Those machines are going to work these abductor muscles. That all goes to that greater trochanter. So instead of a tubercle, it's called a trochanter. Then you have a lesser trochanter, and in the femur, the lesser trochanter faces posterior. On an anterior view, it's kind of, you see it, but it's very medial and posterior. You can see it much better when you're looking from the back posteriorly. Now, in the humerus, we have the deltoid tuberosity for the deltoid muscle. For the actual femur, we're going to see it something very similar. A very prominent ridge along the posterior surface of the shaft. So here's the shaft of the femur right here. Here's the shaft of the femur. What we're going to see with the shaft, on one side, it's nice and smooth. On the other side, there's a little ridge right here. This ridge is where your adductor muscles, your groin muscles insert. Adductor magnus and longus. This ridge is called the linea aspera. Linea aspera. Now, the last thing that we'll talk about is the actual joint, the knee joint right here. And the knee joint is very different in some ways than the elbow joint. The elbow joint was 3 separate bones, humerus, radius, and ulna. Your knee joint's only 2. It's just your tibia and your femur, and that's it. Your fibula is not part of your knee joint. So we do see a third bone here. That third bone, though, is not part of the knee joint. It's separated. So what we see in the knee joint right here is the very smooth areas that we call the condyles. Now in the humerus, we call it the trochlea and the capitulum. In the femur, we don't have such fancy names. All we have are the medial condyle and the lateral condyle. That's a connection, smooth area covered with cartilage. Why? Because we want it to be smooth as we kind of bend and straighten the leg, right? How many times a day do you bend and then straighten your legs? A lot, right? So when you're walking, every time you take a step, you're gonna bend and straighten. Even when you're sitting and you're stretching. So we want that motion to be nice and smooth. And we're gonna have nice, smooth, prominent cartilage as well on the ends here to have nice, smooth, frictionless motion. Now, the medial, how can we tell which side is medial if all we have is a leg? If all we have is a femur right here, how can we tell which one and which side is the actual medial and lateral? Simple. The head always faces inwards towards the joint. So the head of any bone right here is facing medially. If it's on the same side, this is a medial condyle. It's on the same side. If it's on the opposite side, that's a lateral condyle. The epicondyles are these pieces of bone that are on the outside, right? They don't form part of the joint. We can feel the epicondyles. So if you reach and touch your leg shortly above your knee, if it's bent, it's much easier to feel. You will feel these two ends on the outside. That is your medial on the inside, and on the outside, lateral epicondyles. They're not part of the joint, they're for muscular attachment. Now, the next bone is your shin bone, is your tibia. By the way, in the chicken, this is a drumstick, right? So if you're eating chicken next, I know it's kind of gross to think about, next time you eat a drumstick, take a look at how long that tibia is, all right? And then look at the thigh. The thigh is a femur. And every now and then, if you eat like a drumstick, you might see that they remove and cut some of the femur, right? So they actually have the joint there. So if you go to a restaurant, that happens, right? You can actually see like the anterior cruciate ligament and everything in that joint, so it's kind of cool, right? So in terms of the tibia, there's a very thick area here where your quadriceps muscle goes in. This is called the tibial tuberosity, right? Your quadriceps muscles are the biggest, strongest muscles we have in our body. So you have a thick area of the tibia where those muscles go in. What else do we see? You see the condyles over here. Look at how shallow and kind of concaved in it is, right? This allows us to have nice movement here. You're gonna have a medial condyle and a lateral condyle. How can you tell medial and lateral condyles? You can feel the bottom right here. Again, with this right here, the tibia, if I just have a tibia, you don't have a head, how can we tell which side is medial and which side is lateral, right? So what I want you to do is feel where your ankle is. If you feel where your ankle is, do you feel the inside of your ankle? Remember, your ankle is a joint. It's impossible, well, I won't say impossible, it's very hard to break your ankle. Because when you're breaking the ankle, you're not really breaking a bone there usually, or breaking the joint, you're gonna break one of the bones that support the ankle. So what you're feeling on the inside is this part of the tibia right here, called the medial malleolus of the tibia. The medial malleolus is always inwards, it's always medial. That's why it has a name, medial malleolus. So anything on the same side as the medial malleolus is medial. So this is a medial condyle. Everything on the opposite side then is the lateral aspect. This is a lateral condyle. Again, lateral condyle away from the medial malleolus, medial condyle over here on the same side as the medial malleolus. Now, here is the other bone right here, that is your fibula, real thin. In the fibula, you have an area that's kind of rounded, a little bit, larger right here. This is the lateral malleolus of the fibula. So lateral malleolus, a little bit bigger, kind of moves down a little bit more. And it goes like this. The lateral malleolus is actually what we feel when we feel the outside of our ankle. Right? Again, your ankle is not a bone, it's a joint. So you can see medial malleolus over here where your tibia is. I'm trying to put this together, keep it together. And then here's the lateral malleolus. Look at how they kind of hang over like that. That's important because it's going to support your foot. So you can imagine how supported your foot bones are here. It's very hard to actually fracture or dislocate your foot, right? It's very strong ligaments that connect it. It is easy though to sprain an ankle, right? Because you have so many degrees of freedom of movement in the ankle that it is easier to sprain it. Again, lateral malleolus, a little bit longer end of the tibia of the fibula, and then the bigger knobbier end is called the head of the fibula. And the last thing we'll discuss